This is Go All In with Sarah Leslie, helping entrepreneurs live the life they want to live right now, making the money they want to make the way they want to make it, while also living a rich, full life outside of their business without feeling guilty about it. True personal freedom. Let's go. Hello, everybody. I am so glad to be here with you, and I am so glad that you are here too. So, today's topic, we're going to just dive right in, is all about love and relationships and cultivating dynamic, powerful, satisfying love relationships. And I'm tying in as the third part of a mini series around leader energy. So if you're anything like me, when you were, growing up and or getting early in your career, you probably heard or picked up the sentiment that the way you do relationships and the way you do love is totally different from the way you do business and the way you show up in your work life. And what I have come to discover over my 20 plus years of working with people in this similar capacity is that's not true. That's the short answer. I'm going to get into it in greater depth today. And that's the short answer. It's simply not true. And so that can be very confusing, okay? As an adult who's now also a successful business person, and whether you're in your first run of entrepreneurship or you had a career before you're now in entrepreneurship, you're out there carving your own path and you're charting new territory. And to not be able to create a deeply satisfying love life can be very frustrating. I know it was for me, okay? I was killing it in my business. At the time I was working for someone else, I was well into my career. And I just started to notice this trend in my dating life and even in my first marriage, we'll just say in my love life, where it just wasn't satisfying, where I felt frustrated at the degree to which I was showing up compared to the degree to which the people I was dating were showing up. And it felt like there was just a lot of misalignment. And overall, right, I ended up feeling dissatisfied within my love relationships. And as I started to notice this pattern specifically in my love relationships, I started to realize, wow, this isn't even just applicable to my love life. It's applicable to my relationships as a whole. And I was seeing it very clearly and what I'll just say profoundly within my significant relationships. So within the relationships that I call like the inner circle, those people closest to you where you have the highest level of investment with. And so I knew there was more to this that I needed to study, research, and ultimately come to understand so that I could show up differently. So all of that I want to put out there so that you can know, of course, as in the way that I show up in general, I want you to know you're not alone. And that I too have had these same experiences that I am here sharing with you. So if I can do it, you can also do it. And I want to help fill in that gap of like, what's the missing information? What's the information that you've been given that actually, and some of it can feel like it's the truth. So it is even more confusing to sort through because your mind says, yeah, but this is what's true. And I'm going to offer you some new ways to think about it. I mean, even just getting us started here by saying it's actually the same skill sets that are needed and the same way you show up in the world, whether it's in business or it's in love. That right there can be extremely resistance, right? There can be a lot of resistance around hearing that because it most likely goes against what you learned earlier in your life, what your parents taught you, what the other significant people in your life taught you about relationships. and how to show up in relationships. And I think for both men and women and everybody in between, however you identify gender wise, we got taught, in addition to just what your own culture and upbringing had to say about relationships, and also adding in that layer of gender, right? And the differences of what certain genders get taught about how to show up in relationships. So this is an area, and also where there's just so much information and so many tidbits and just a million little things I could tie in here. And I'm going to streamline it as much as I can so that it can be the most useful and clear for you. Now, some of the things that I came to feel about my own personal love life, right, is this feeling around what the heck is wrong with me? That was my predominant one, because I kept finding myself in these relationships where I felt dissatisfied. And so naturally, right, I would then blame them and also blame myself, right? And so sometimes what that sounded like is I have a bad picker, or I just can't seem to find the right person, or I just can't seem to find the right type of person, or all the good ones are gone already, or all the good ones are spoken for, or I'm really good at things related to business and I'm just not good at relationships. Do any of these sound familiar? Can you relate to any of those? Right? And I'd be curious to hear, what are yours? What are the things that you learned? What are the things that you got taught? I'm sure again, this is like an area I could give an endless list. And just boiling it down to a handful, right? There's this sense of blame and or not being able to have what you want. So let's dive in, okay? I'm going to talk today around this love that we all crave, right? This love that you crave, the love that you want. And yet it feels so hard and confusing and sticky. Why is that? And what do you need to do to be able to shift how you're showing up in the world in order to create that amazing love that your heart longs for? And specifically looking at how to bring leader energy into your love life and into your significant relationships. Okay. So why does this happen, right? Why do we end up concluding love is really hard? Relationships are really hard. Why do we end up concluding I'm really good at loving people, but other people disappoint me, or I don't get the love back that I really most desire? Why does it feel like it's confusing and takes a lot of work? So part of what's happening here, right, is the way that we've been taught about relationships sets us up for relationships to be hard, right? And for relationships to be confusing. And so we're just literally set up from the beginning, from the get-go, for relationships to cause a lot of internal conflict. And also for us to, what feels like so naturally, blame another person and or a whole gender sometimes for how they show up and for how they do love, right? And so there's just a lot of confusion that you literally bring into your now current way of doing your love life. And so to me, that's the most important thing to recognize, is to understand that this didn't just start now, and it didn't even start with you. It actually was going on even before you started being interested in romantic relationships or started feeling the attraction of other people in that way. So it's core to who you are as a human, okay? So then we've got to go deeper. We've got to look at this differently. So the other thing that I think is important to acknowledge and call out here is a lot of folks that I talk to who are in my world and in my audience talk about being very loving themselves, that they show up as a giver, that they show up as someone who cultivates love, who loves deeply or hard or loves a lot, depending on what words fit for you. And yet they end up feeling like the love that they get in return falls short of what they're truly desiring. Okay. So again, it's not to say you're not creating love because you are, right? That's just part of who you are and part of how you show up in the world. However, what you're noticing most likely is you're not feeling deeply satisfied in the relationships that you're in. Okay. And so it's important to recognize if you're always the helper or you're always the giver, then probably a lot of what's happening here for you is you're simply just not as proficient at receiving love, at receiving help. And therefore, this is just going to be an area that's harder for you to do, which also means it's going to feel more uncomfortable for you to be receiving love, for you to be loved on. And so when it's harder, naturally, we will push it away unintentionally and most of the time unconsciously. Okay, so super important to recognize this is part of why it's so hard to create the love that you desire, the dynamic relationships that you're craving. So, no doubt you've tried, right? And you've done so many different things and you've put yourself out there in so many different ways. And oh my goodness, I got so much dating advice and so much countless advice around love and how to show up in my marriage and how to be a good wife and so many things, right? And I also, as I alluded to earlier, certainly learned a ton just from witnessing my parents and the interactions that they had with each other on a daily basis, the interactions that they had with me and my sister on a daily basis, and then other loved ones in our circle. And then, of course, you're going to be taking in so much from media, right? And the TV that you would have been watching as a younger person. And then naturally, as you're getting older, right, you start to filter through a bunch of things and then add in, take away. And yet the core is already built for you. And I think it's just important to recognize that just because you might identify yourself as being good at loving other people or caring about other people, it does automatically assume or translate that you will then be good at receiving the love that you want back, right? So just to clarify. And also, if you're that person, you probably witnessed your family, your parents, other important people in your early childhood doing really good at loving other people, but not as good at getting the love in return. Now, again, a lot of this you would have picked up unconsciously because the adults in our upbringing were not like, I don't feel deeply loved by my partner, or I don't feel deeply loved by my kids. They probably weren't saying that 9 times out of 10 to you, right, as the child. And also, maybe they were, right? I know that I've worked with, in my 20 years as a therapist, I have worked with countless numbers of people who had parents who lacked in the wisdom or boundaries to not disclose those type of things with their kids and did share that, right? And so maybe you did hear one of your primary caregivers or a close family member actually share that with you, and it left an impression. That's just how we operate as humans. We're little sponges at that age, and we just collect all of this data and then store it in the back of our minds and hold on to it and filter through it when we then hit events as we get older to be able to understand what we're then experiencing in our own life. Okay, so the other thing to bring up here, right, for why you're not able to cultivate the love that you want is because you're actually looking for it rather than cultivating it within yourself first. So I used to say this like endlessly. I feel like I said it a lot of times that I was looking for the one. that I was looking for the right one. I was looking for my Prince Charming. I was looking for my other half, things that especially little girls get taught. And from people as well as the movies, right? All of the Disney movies to fall in love with the prince who's going to come and take care of you. Okay. And so what we end up perceiving and understanding is that we are now and should be looking, trying to find the one who's going to come and fill, right? And even as little boys, you get taught similar, right? To find that special girl, to find that special person who will light you up, who will complete you, who will feel like such a good fit, who you have a lot of things in common with, right? And so all of us get taught in, again, various different ways to look outside of yourself to find this love. So this is where we start to get really confused, right? Is because we're learning to literally look outside of ourselves for something to fill us up. So you're actually striving to obtain something, right? It becomes an achievement process, an achievement-oriented goal versus something that you're learning to be yourself first. So it's a radically different thing to actually be taught and to learn the skill sets of how to actually show up as someone who deeply loves and cherishes themselves first before going out to find the one, right? Again, that to me is very old language that I no longer use. And I'm using it here intentionally because chances are that is what you've heard and that is what will stand out in your mind. So I'm specifically doing it to be relatable. So you're striving to reach a goal versus actually learning how to be that person, be someone who's amazing at receiving love as well as giving love. Does this sound like an experience that you can relate to? I would love to hear from you. Drop it in the comments. So this is how I interpreted what I learned about love, right? And it comes from so many different directions, right? As you've heard me talk about before, if you've been around in my world, right, in church, the way I understood a lot of the things that I was learning in church, which is an amazing place to learn and grow, it also can be a really harmful place to learn how to strive and how to do for others as the most important thing. And so I just didn't understand or learn how to really value myself first. Okay. Even the way I got taught about God was that God was outside of myself and that this was like an entity, a being who loved me versus it being God is within me, therefore making me amazing, right? And a creation of God. Therefore, I'm already fully capable and able and worthy of receiving amazing love, which is then what allows me to love other people at the highest level. Another way of saying that is to love other people unconditionally, because I actually learned how to love myself first unconditionally. So if you're anything like me, you did not learn how to love yourself unconditionally. And let's be real, most people that I have met, I really have yet to meet anyone who learned how to love themselves unconditionally at such a degree that they then are showing up like total rock stars in their love life and in all of their areas. So that being said, I just look at it like it's part of the human experience. Whatever your experience was as a young person, now as an adult charting your own path in the world, it's just your time. It's your beautiful, amazing, inspiring time to learn how to lead yourself in such a way that you are able to get all of your needs met, that you are able to be fully self-sufficient emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, all of the things, which is what allows you, promotes, ensures you are letting yourself be loved. You're learning or embodying or leading with unconditional love, which is a surefire way. It's a bulletproof plan to creating and cultivating that dynamic love you're craving. Okay, so the shift here is releasing the old way of doing love, right? And embracing the new way to think about and a new way of being love. So we actually need the same skill sets in all the areas of our life. Of course, we're going to show up differently in the different areas because they're just simply different outcomes that we're looking for. And at the core, it's the same skill sets, which is so beautiful and exciting because you really only need like one universal, we'll say, list of skills in order to live a really beautiful, amazing, embodied life. Okay, so what are the skill sets that you need in order to be love, right? In order for you to love unconditionally, what are the skill sets? So broadly speaking here, it's the way that I've defined leader energy, right? Broadly speaking, it's you being able to show up in leader energy. And the way that I have defined leader energy in the last 2 episodes is effectively managing your own energy. Okay. And the details there is effectively managing your own thoughts and feelings such that you're able to continue showing up and taking action in your life and creating the results that you desire. So, what does that mean? Just for an example, if that still feels maybe a little bit more unclear than you want it or more vague than you want it, it means if you're a person who deals with feeling anxious a lot of the time or not as self-confident as you want to be, then mastering your own energy is the solution, right? So that you can upgrade your own energy level to where you no longer feel that lack inside of you, that nervous energy inside of you. You're able to upgrade the thoughts you spend time with and the feelings you experience such that you feel confident and empowered, which is a completely different experience going throughout the world and making decisions, right? You're a completely different person when you're making empowered decisions versus when you're making fearful decisions. So it can sound like a small shift and it changes your entire life. So that is the overarching key to this whole new way of showing up in your love relationships and creating deeply satisfying love with those people you want to feel that way with. So other aspects of this, right? For the skill sets that you need, it's feeling a deep sense of self-appreciation, of being able to value yourself the same way that you value those other really important people in your life, to be respecting of yourself, having self-respect and being respectful towards yourself the same way that you are with those really important people and sometimes just perfect strangers, right? I remember noticing how I was so respectful and considerate of complete strangers that I would interact with throughout the day. And I was more, right? I would treat them better than I was myself, right? And again, this is like a lot of the times it's unintentional and it's unconscious. So you don't know you're doing it. And one example would be that I would be really hard on myself, right? So if I was at an event that someone else was hosting and it was a networking event or it was a class that they were teaching, and afterwards, my reaction to them would be, "This was amazing. Like, you put so much time and effort into this, and you have cultivated a really beautiful experience. Like, really well done." Now, if I hosted an event or I finished teaching a class, my first set of thoughts was something more like, "Oh, okay, that was good. And next time I want to make sure to do this. I wonder why there weren't as many people here. I wonder so and so didn't show up. It's so interesting. I didn't feel like this part really landed well. I wonder how I could have shared that differently so that people responded better or I got more buy in from them," and on. Okay. So you see the radical difference between those two different ways of responding? Yes. That is what is meant about treating yourself the way that you treat others, right? Including strangers, right? You think about how you treat strangers, think about how you treat your most loved ones. And again, I say both of those because sometimes we actually don't treat our loved ones all that great. And also, sometimes we don't treat them great and we're completely oblivious to it. So just notice where it's true for you that you treat others better than you treat yourself, right? Let those just rise up inside of you right now and like ask yourself, where is that true that I do treat other people so much better than I treat myself? Lean in. Okay. So, other like tidbits here, right? It's how well do you eat? Are you super conscious of how you manage your energy? Do you safeguard your schedule? Do you only have things on your calendar that really light you up? Do you set aside plenty of time for rest and enjoyment and adventure? Do you on and on, right? Do you have 100% faith in yourself the same way you probably have for your partner or for your significant other? Or for your kids, right? Do you have that feeling of trust with yourself the way that you say you have with other people? Maybe your parents or your sibling, right? Or your best friend. So it's hard to translate these skill sets inside of your most intimate relationships when you're not already cultivating them, embodying them for yourself first. It's just almost impossible. And so I'm just going to leave it at why is it so much harder, right, to apply these skill sets in those most intimate relationships? Because you are not embodying them with yourself first. And maybe you've heard this before. I personally had heard this 1,000 times as a therapist, again, for 20 years, and helping people and hearing their deepest secrets and helping them work through their most difficult relationship challenges. I'd heard it many times and I had taught it many times. And it wasn't until now, currently it's 2024. This would have been my great awakening, as I call it, the first round. Well, actually, I guess second round of my great awakening was in 2018. And I got to a point in my own life where I was like, whoa, something radically has to change. I'll save that story for a different episode. And I delved into a thread of personal growth and personal development that I had never encountered before. And I started learning really new and different things, which is when I realized, wow, there's just an endless amount of information out there and an endless amount of ways to better understand myself. I need to commit myself to being a lifelong learner, which I am. And it opened my eyes to better understand this principle of how we actually do need to love ourselves first in order for us to get the kind of love, experience the kind of love that we most want to experience with someone else. Okay. So I'm not saying you can't love someone else. I'm not saying you can't feel love from someone else. None of that. No, I'm just simply saying, right? We're going all in. We want the absolute best experience, the most love we could ever imagine. this is how you do it. So let's dive in to just some other really specific action steps that you can implement to be able to make this happen as quickly as possible for you. Now, of course, my number one recommendation will always be to hire me, right? And or hire someone who's a good fit for you. I just make that assumption since you're here with me. And or hiring an expert who can really radically minimize the time on learning how to do this and learning these skill sets and embodying these skill sets. Because again, these are the skill sets that make or break your success in entrepreneurship, in business, in love, in all the areas of your life. In allowing yourself to have the adventure and the free time where you really deeply enjoy it, same. Okay, so first one that I'm going to offer here, in addition to hiring a coach or a mentor, is you be love. Okay. So it's super simple. You are love. And so I want you to actually simply practice being love first to yourself. So it's a shift in the way you're probably focusing right now on doing love. So most of us, again, we love outside and we love really hard and we love really well, right? And we do all kinds of like amazing things for other people and set up really cool experiences for them. And we like really want to make sure they're doing amazing. And I want you to shift that around to you giving that attention to you. Okay? Because the shift here is that you actually need to show up that way yourself with yourself first in order to experience the most amazing love with other people. Okay, so you focus on being the rock star that you are, that gets treated like a rock star. You condition yourself to be treated that way first. So rewind here and listen to all of those skill sets. And that is the perfect place to start to actually implementing this. Okay. And just pick one or two that you can zero in on and start doing with yourself and noticing how you're showing up with yourself and notice how you would like to show up instead. And I'm just going to say it to be really like blunt and direct. What you're doing in this action step is releasing those parts of you that have limitations and conditions around the love you feel for yourself. Another very direct way of saying this is releasing self-hatred, releasing disrespect of yourself. Okay. So again, if you know my story, I got to around age 38. I'm 40, almost 47. And I was like miserable. And what I learned, very crash course quickly learned, is I actually was carrying a lot of self-hatred, which is why I overworked, which is why I showed up for my job at 1,000% and at 50% in my own life. Okay. Can you relate to that? I know so many people that fit in this category. Okay. Number 2, love comes from within first and then goes out. Okay. So the action step here is you're learning to understand the design of life. Okay. You've been going at probably about this backwards, like I've been talking about in this episode. And it probably is true, just like in business, just like in sales, just like in other relationships and cultivating time off and hobbies and rich adventure outside of your business, right? You are going about it backwards, probably in all the areas, or at least some of them. Again, dialing it in here to love and relationships, is that you're looking for it to happen outside of you first. Okay? You're looking for some proof outside first, some experience outside first, versus focusing in on how you're showing up first, right? So you're wanting to cultivate leader energy inside of yourself. Okay. Leader energy shows up confident, calm, one of the ways that I posted today on Facebook was self-confidence equals or means I am okay no matter what happens in my world. So that just really gets to the heart of this action step. Knowing and cultivating a knowing I will be okay no matter what happens in my world. Okay? So this is so important. At first, does it feel like work? Because it's so different to how you've been living for like lots of years before now. It will in fact feel abnormal. It will feel like you're potentially being an imposter. It will feel phony. It will feel fake. And really underneath all of that, you're just feeling so scared. Okay? You're just feeling terrified to show up differently and go against the program you've been operating for a very long time. So just know it's just different. And this is understanding the actual design of life versus going off of what you were taught, which has not gotten you to where you want to be. Okay. And lastly, number 3, learn how to prioritize yourself first over everyone else without feeling guilty. Okay. So all of these steps are super important and they're all like intertwined and connected. And I tacked on the without feeling guilty because again, when we're embodying leader energy and when we are in the place of feeling self-sufficient and leading ourselves at the highest degree, at the most powerful way we can, we're not going to feel guilty about making sure all of our needs are met. Those two things just are not in alignment. So it's actually a learned process, right? Which is what I spend a huge part. I mean, you could say it's all of what I do in my coaching. It's not all of it. And when you're, for instance, showing up powerfully on sales calls, you're actually prioritizing yourself over everyone else because you're showing up at the highest degree that you know how to do and offering your very best service, presence, attention to this other human who's coming to you for help. Okay? When you're prioritizing yourself over everyone else, you're setting really clear boundaries about how far your energy can be taxed, right? So if for sure you have a really busy weekend and you've got, I don't know, family coming in, all of the things, and then on Monday, someone asks if you can show up for a presentation and you just recognize like, yeah, no, I can't because I've already committed to this. And as much as I want to do that, my energy won't allow me. Like I just know my own limits and I've got to honor my own limits and allow for that Monday morning to just really be about rest and recovery. And you turn that opportunity down. And of course you say like, hey, please hit me up again. Like, yes, I want to do that. That's prioritizing yourself without feeling bad about it, right? So you don't lament and be like, oh, I should have taken that opportunity. I'm missing out. Oh, I might not get another one or whatever your mind might want to serve up for you. So those are some examples of what it looks like to actually operate in the world as someone who knows how to prioritize their own energy, prioritize themselves, to love themselves. Okay. So to do this work the quickest and most effective, hire an expert. That is what I have committed my entire life to do, to learn about, to understand, and now to be able to help other people do it easily and deliciously. If you're anything like me, and I say this for you, if you're anything like me, I waited several years before I hired someone who was rockstar amazing, okay? And I suffered greatly and way more than I needed to, which meant I worked so much harder in my business. I worked so much harder in my relationships. And I spent so much more time feeling frustrated because I wasn't creating what I really wanted to. So that's all I have for the topic. I want to invite you to my upcoming masterclass, which is June 18th at 2 p.m. I have a monthly masterclass that I host. It is typically on the third Wednesday of every month. Feel free to shoot me an email to be able to sign up for that monthly occurrence. My email address is listed in the show notes. And if you haven't already liked and subscribed to this podcast to receive notifications when the next one is being dropped, definitely please do that. And everything else that you need that I have mentioned here in the show notes is in the show notes, as well as how to work with me. Between now and when I see you next, go and be extraordinary. Ready to hire your own personal one-to-one mentor and coach to help take your life to the next level? Go to my website and sign up for a no-charge, no-pressure conversation where you and I will get to know each other better, where I get to hear about your specific unique vision and also help you dial right into exactly what is holding you back. And if it feels like a good fit for us to work together, we'll talk about what that would look like. All right, you guys, go be extraordinary.